What is it exactly that
God is looking for from us? What does He want from us? That's a fair question, isn't it? Don't you think that's a fair question?
Yes.
I think it's a fair question. If you ask different people, you'll get different answers. Some people have a long list of things to do. And after you've done those things, then there's more. And if you take that path, it's one of those kind of things, it reminds me of the expression, there's a kind of a figure of speech about leading a donkey with, there's a carrot and the stick, You can lead a donkey by holding out a carrot in front of it, or hitting it on the backside with a stick, you can motivate it. And you might have seen this kind of in an illustration, this idea of the carrot is out in front of the donkey on a stick, dangling in front of him. And so he takes one step forward, but then because the carrot is attached, he goes forward too. And so you never quite get to the goal. And a lot of things, when you ask people, what is it that God's looking for from me, a lot of the explanations that some people have reminds me of that, a goal that's never attainable. It just keeps you moving forward. But I don't think that's the case. I don't think that's the right solution. I think it's much more simple than that. In fact, the reality of it is that God being God and being perfect in all respects, it's not really, if I could just step back from the question a little bit, it's not really fair for a God that's perfect in all respects to ask of us, who are definitely imperfect in many respects, the kind of perfection that characterizes who He is. Yet that's sort of the impression that you get, that we're striving after God-like perfection. And the sad news about that is, no matter who you are and no matter what kind of energy you put into it, though in relative terms some people might make a better appearance to other people, in relative terms, there's no human being capable of God-like perfection. There's always flaws in human nature. And even if those flaws happen to be tried over my efforts at self-perfection, that's also a flaw and also a fault. But thankfully, the truth of the matter is, God knows us better than even we're willing to admit about ourselves sometimes. And He knows that we're not capable of His standard of perfection. I hope that doesn't scare you for me to say that, but I think that's true. That's why He didn't just sit up in heaven and send down a lot of requirements. Do you hear that? That's why He didn't just sit up in heaven and send messengers with lists of to-do lists, things to do and things not to do, and requirements, which is, again, how a lot of people traditionally view the question. What is God looking for from me? Instead, what He did was He sent Jesus. And the reason we call Christianity is because it's about Christ. It's about Jesus. And He sent Jesus to do for us what we were incapable of doing for ourselves. What's causing that, Ellie?
I don't know. Is that you or is that back here?
It's what?
Is it back here or is that...
Oh, it's coming out of that. I don't know. It's some kind of interference. Maybe our microphone is on somebody else's wavelength. Maybe somebody's got a powerful Wi-Fi hotspot over here somewhere. I don't know. We'll try to just live with it.
Okay.
Let's see, what were we talking about? Oh yes, that's why He sent Jesus. And that's really what Christianity is about Jesus. And what did Jesus come to do? Well, again, if you talk to some people who view the question as a matter of things we do, view it from a human point of view, they will say, well, Jesus came to tell us how to live. But that's not really true. And that's not really exactly the case. He didn't just come to tell us how to live. In fact, you find out most of the time He doesn't tell you how to live. What most of His teaching, most of His preaching is about is to bring people to a point of trusting in and placing their faith in Him as a Savior, as one who comes to rescue. That's why on the night He was born, we talk about this at Christmas time, but even though it's not Christmas time, I think it's fair to talk about it now too. To mention, at least, bring it up. That's why the angel said on the night that He was born, "Unto you this day is born in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord." He came to rescue or to save, or to do for us what we could not do for ourselves. And what we could not do for ourselves, to put ourselves in right relationship with a perfect God. Because the fact of the matter is, no matter who we are, and no matter what our characteristics are of our life in relative terms of goodness or badness, the truth of it is, in God's terms, we are all flawed. We all come short of His standard of perfection. And that degree to which we fall short has many names. I hate to use the word sin because it sounds so ugly. Sin is one word. We could say the disqualification. We could say transgressions. Anything that disqualifies us from not being perfect. Now, if it were possible for us to be perfect, if it were possible for us to have a relationship with God based on our own goodness and our own perfection, then Jesus need not have come at all. And He certainly need not have gone to the cross and died on the cross. It seems like such a brutal and such a terrible thing. It seems like such a horrific thing that He did. And it was horrific. I'm sure for the disciples all standing around when Jesus died on the cross, we know from reading the Bible that they did not understand what was happening. They didn't know why He did it. In fact, from the human side of things, you couldn't know, you couldn't see. But God had something in mind, and Jesus had something in mind through His death. And what nobody could see is that Jesus had no transgressions. Jesus had no flaws. Jesus had no sins. Jesus lived up to God's standard of perfection. And on the cross, He sacrificed Himself and allowed God to place on Him and be punished in our place for everything wrong with us. So therefore, then, the message of Christianity is not try to do better, not try to make up for the wrong you've done, merely trust in Jesus as the mediator, as the sacrifice, as the one who stands between us and God. Now I wanted to read a little story that makes this point. And this is an incident. I like this case here. It's a good story. It's Acts chapter 16. And this is a little incident in the life of a man named Paul. He was originally called Saul. And in the Hebrew language, the names all are important. They mean things. Not just in Hebrew, lots of language, that's true. And the name Saul, now, we're told that the name Saul means destroyer. Now, I'm trying to think, what were the parents thinking? That child of yours, he's really wild. Well, we named him Destroyer. No, Saul is said to mean destroyer. And he was, as a matter of fact, that was apropos for him because he was not a believer in Jesus during Jesus' earthly ministry. He was a rejecter of Christ. He did not believe Jesus' claims during His earthly ministry. As far as we know, he never saw Him, really, or heard Him teach. But we do know this, that when the church started, when people began to believe in Jesus, the first disciples, Saul was one of those who persecuted them, who followed them from town to town. And what they saw, the Jewish establishment saw them as heretical Jews, as Jews who believed something that was atrocious. They didn't like them. And so Paul, then called Saul, chased them around from town to town, threw them into prison. But the funny thing about Jesus is that He's real. Funny thing about it is, not only is He real, He can do whatever He wants to do. And Jesus saw something in this man Saul that He felt like he wanted. He needed, I guess. That's my supposition. At any rate, Jesus appeared to him. This is after His death, after His resurrection. And Jesus appeared to him in a bright and blinding light as He was traveling to throw Christians into prison. And it was undeniable. And the light was so bright and the intensity of the experience was so extreme that Paul, then called Saul, he said we were all fallen to the ground. They all just fell on their faces in the dust. And he heard a voice speaking to him, he says, in the Hebrew language, saying, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? And he said, who are you, Lord? Called him Lord in that bright light, I suppose. He knew he was in the presence of some supernatural deity or something. So he says, who are you, Lord? He says, I'm Jesus, the one you're persecuting. So he had it clear then. Well, that experience was undeniable for him. Although a third party might want to question it, it was undeniable for him. And his life changed instantly. And he became a believer. He didn't have much choice. I mean, hard to not believe in a situation like that. And Jesus told him, I have appeared to you for this purpose, to make you a witness. You know what a witness is? A witness is a person who, in court, a witness testifies about what they've seen. Like if there's a traffic accident, and they call on witnesses. And they say, they don't ask for your opinion if you're in court. They don't want to know how you feel about things. They just want to know what you've seen. Is that right? Am I right about that? That's all a witness does. He tells what he's seen. And if you're going to tell something